The CEO of childhood. Your 2-year-old is failing their performance review. They lack focus during unstructured block time. Their vocabulary acquisition metrics are currently lagging 3% behind the 85th percentile benchmark. Their gross motor skills show promise, but their resistance to the organic sensory play integration module is a serious red flag. If a stranger spoke to you like this about a toddler, you would think they had lost their mind. You would call them cold, robotic, and thoroughly detached from the beautiful, chaotic reality of raising a human being. Yet, if you look at the digital footprint of the modern nursery, this is exactly the mindset we have adopted. You didn't mean for this to happen. You just wanted to be a good parent. You bought the best-selling books. You downloaded the tracking apps. You joined the hyper-niche parenting forums. But somewhere between the hospital and their first birthday, the crib turned into a cubicle. You don't just feed your child anymore. You track their macronutrient intake and expose them to a meticulously curated, scientifically sequenced rotation of allergens. You don't just put them to sleep. You aggressively manage their wake windows. You optimize the ambient room temperature and white noise frequencies. You desperately try to hack their sleep regressions like a stressed programmer trying to debug a critical server failure at 2 in the morning. Every ounce of milk is logged. Every milestone is charted. Even joy is scheduled. Playtime is no longer just playing, it is heavily researched, high-yield cognitive stimulation designed to maximize synaptic pruning. You have accidentally become the CEO of your child's development. And you are running the most exhausting, high-stakes startup in human history. The modern, highly invested parent doesn't just raise a kid. They project manage them. And the pressure is absolutely crushing. In this new paradigm, every single cry, every skipped nap, every public tantrum ceases to be a normal biological function of growing up. Instead, it becomes a terrifying data point. It flashes like a warning light on your mental dashboard. It feels like a direct, undeniable reflection of your competence, a glaring indicator that your management strategy is fatally flawed. You are terrified that if you miss a single developmental window, if you buy the wrong open-ended wooden toy, if you let them watch 10 minutes too much of a screen, you will permanently derail their life trajectory. You feel the heavy, suffocating weight of their entire adult future resting squarely on your ability to synthesize conflicting pediatric research while severely sleep-deprived. So, you double down. You research more. You optimize harder. You try to squeeze every last drop of potential out of every waking moment, frantically trying to control an inherently uncontrollable process. We have entirely replaced human intuition with frantic analytics. We have traded the messy, comforting sanctuary of the home for the sterile, metric-driven efficiency of a corporate boardroom. And we are draining our own life force in the process, staring at our phones in the dark, wondering why we feel so entirely empty when we are supposedly doing everything exactly right. But the sheer, bone-deep exhaustion isn't even the biggest problem. We've convinced ourselves that if we just gather enough data, we can engineer the perfect human. But what happens when you try to manage a developing brain like a Fortune 500 company? The result isn't just parental burnout. It's a hidden psychological trap that we are blindly walking right into. The ghost in the nursery. Why do we do this to ourselves? Why do we voluntarily chain our sanity to sleep-tracking apps, developmental spreadsheets, and a relentless cycle of self-doubt? If you strip away the buzzwords, the organic sensory toys, and the hyper-curated aesthetics of modern parenting, you will not find a burning desire for academic superiority. You will find something much more primal. You will find fear. Every time you hover over your child, terrified of making the wrong choice, you are not really looking at them. You are looking at a ghost. The ghost is your own childhood. Our generation is arguably the most self-aware, therapy-fluent cohort of parents in human history. We know exactly what our parents did wrong. We remember the emotional dismissals. We remember the harsh discipline, the conditional love, the quiet neglect, or the explosive anger that dictated the temperature of our childhood homes. We have spent our entire adult lives unpacking the baggage handed to us by flawed people. We have made a silent, blood-sworn vow. The cycle ends with me. This is the raw, unspoken engine driving the modern optimization machine. We are not just trying to raise capable adults. We are desperately trying to build a psychological time machine. We are attempting to retroactively heal our own inner child by ensuring our actual child never experiences a single moment of the pain we felt. Because of this profound fear of repeating history, we shift our primary objective. We stop raising them, and we start curating them. We grew up in an era where children's feelings were rarely the center of the universe. So, we swung the pendulum entirely in the opposite direction. Now, the toddler's emotional state dictates the gravitational pull of the entire household. You act as a full-time emotional bodyguard. You stand between your child and the natural friction of the world, swatting away boredom, intercepting minor disappointments, and buffering them from the devastating reality of the word no. If they are sad, you rush in with an avalanche of active listening and emotional validation, secretly terrified that letting them process negative emotions alone for 3 minutes will inflict permanent psychological scarring. If they fail at a simple task, you immediately reframe it, cushion it, and distract them from the sting of inadequacy. You treat everyday frustration like it is a toxic spill. It must be contained, sanitized, and neutralized before it can contaminate their developing psyche. It takes an immense, paralyzing amount of cognitive energy to constantly audit your own parenting in real time. You police your own tone. You swallow your own exhaustion. You run every spontaneous reaction through a mental filter of best practices before you let it escape your mouth. You become a human shock absorber, taking every tiny bump in the road and absorbing the violent impact straight into your own nervous system, just so your child never has to feel the jolt. It is a beautiful, deeply loving intention. It is also entirely unsustainable. In our desperate attempt to shield our children from the pain of our own pasts, we believe we are building them a bulletproof armor. But we aren't. We are actually introducing a brand new threat into the home. And the first casualty of this new threat isn't even the child. The boardroom marriage. The first casualty of hyper-optimized parenting is your partnership. Before the baby arrived, your home was a sanctuary. It was the one place on earth where you could drop your guard, take off your armor, and simply exhale. Now, it is a 24-hour command center. It is a high-pressure office that never closes, staffed by 2 profoundly exhausted co-managers who are drowning in conflicting performance metrics. Romance has been entirely replaced by logistics. Intimate evening conversations have devolved into tense, hushed strategy meetings over the green night vision glow of a baby monitor. You don't ask about each other's day anymore. You debrief. You interrogate each other on nap totals, ounce consumption, and bowel movement consistency. You begin to treat your partner not as a lover, but as an unreliable shift worker whose operational competence you are secretly beginning to question. This is where the boardroom marriage takes its toll. When raising a child becomes a rigid, high-stakes corporate project, every minor disagreement transforms into a catastrophic threat to the mission. You aren't just arguing about bedtime routines. You are fighting a brutal proxy war over conflicting podcasts, competing pediatric neurodevelopment theories, and deeply ingrained anxieties. One of you wants to follow the gentle parenting script to the exact syllable. The other thinks a rigid schedule is the only path to survival. Suddenly, a 5-minute delay in the sleep protocol isn't a mistake, it feels like an act of deliberate sabotage. Resentment slowly becomes the oxygen in the room. You start keeping score. You weaponize your exhaustion. You track who woke up last, who researched the developmental milestones, and who correctly de-escalated the toddler's meltdown at the grocery store. The scorekeeping is petty, but it is inevitable. When you both feel like failing executives staring down a terrible quarterly review, you desperately look for someone else to blame for the missed targets. Your marriage is collapsing under the unbearable, crushing weight of perfectionism. The very foundation of the family, the connection between the 2 people who started it, is eroding away, completely sacrificed on the altar of optimal development. You are so fiercely focused on curating a trauma-free, perfectly stimulated environment for the child that you are entirely ignoring the toxic, high-stress atmosphere you are creating for each other. You have built a beautiful, ergonomically perfect, sustainably sourced nursery. But you have built it inside a burning building. And the tragic irony is that children are incredibly perceptive emotional barometers. They don't care about the organic sensory bins or the meticulously planned wake windows. They feel the unspoken tension in the hallway. They absorb the quiet hostility during the evening handoff. With the marriage fracturing and the home feeling like a high-pressure office, exhausted parents double down on the only thing they think they can still control, the child's success. But a shocking body of empirical research reveals that all this frantic, soul-crushing effort is achieving the exact opposite of what we intend. Let's look at the actual science of human resilience. For decades, developmental psychologists have been observing a disturbing trend. As parents became more involved, more educated, and more fiercely protective of their children's emotional well-being, the children themselves did not become happier. In fact, they became unprecedentedly anxious. To understand why, you have to understand how the human psyche actually grows. Think of emotional resilience exactly like a biological immune system. If you lock a child in a perfectly sterile, hermetically sealed room from birth, they will never catch a cold. But the moment they step outside and encounter a single, everyday microbe, their unpracticed immune system will completely collapse. Your child's mind works the exact same way. Psychological immunity is not built in a vacuum. It is forged in the fires of minor adversity. It requires exposure to manageable friction. When you curate a life completely devoid of struggle, you are creating a sterile emotional environment. When you rush in to mediate every tiny playground dispute, you rob them of the chance to learn conflict resolution. When you immediately replace a broken toy so they don't cry, you steal their opportunity to process grief and adapt to loss. When you schedule every waking minute with high-yield enrichment activities, you completely eradicate boredom. And boredom is not a failure of parenting. Boredom is the biological prerequisite for imagination. It is the crucial, uncomfortable empty space where a child is forced to discover who they actually are, rather than just consuming what is meticulously placed in front of them. We have shifted from helicopter parenting, hovering over them in a state of constant panic, to snowplow parenting. We drive aggressively ahead of our children, violently clearing away every obstacle, every disappointment, and every sharp edge before they can even perceive it. We are trying to clear the path for the child. But in reality, we have entirely failed to prepare the child for the path. Because eventually, the snowplow runs out of gas. Eventually, they will leave your perfectly optimized ecosystem. They will face a teacher who doesn't validate their feelings. They will face a boss who doesn't care about their sensory preferences. They will encounter the cold, unyielding reality of the adult world, which will not instantly mold itself to their comfort. And when that happens, the highly optimized child does not thrive. They shatter. Without the accumulated repetitions of failing, recovering, and realizing that they survived the failure, they have zero internal evidence of their own strength. They subconsciously internalize your constant, frantic intervention as a terrifying, unspoken message: the world is incredibly dangerous, and I am fundamentally incapable of handling it alone. By frantically trying to shield them from anxiety, we have effectively manufactured it. This is the profound relief you have been desperately searching for. You can stop. The spreadsheets, the frantic late-night research, the crushing guilt over a missed developmental window, none of it is actually building a better adult. It is merely feeding your own anxiety while actively dismantling their natural resilience. We have spent all our energy trying to eliminate struggle, only to discover that a lack of struggle is exactly what breaks them. If perfection is a poison disguised as a cure, then what is the antidote? The answer is a radical psychological concept that goes against every single instinct a modern parent possesses. In 1953, a British pediatrician and psychoanalyst named Donald Winnicott introduced a concept that would absolutely terrify the modern, hyper-optimized parent. He called it the good enough parent. Winnicott observed that infants absolutely need a perfectly attuned caregiver in the very beginning. When they cry, you must answer. But as the child grows, perfection suddenly becomes a massive liability. He realized that a parent who constantly meets every single need, immediately and flawlessly, actually harms the child's development. Instead, he argued, a parent must slowly, gently, and intentionally fail. Not in catastrophic, dangerous ways, of course. In small, manageable ways. You take a minute longer to answer a demand. You let them struggle to open a box instead of immediately opening it for them. You allow a moment of boredom or frustration to exist in the room without rushing in to completely neutralize it. These micro-failures are not signs of bad parenting. They are the essential psychological building blocks of human independence. When you fail just a little bit, you create a tiny, invisible gap between what your child wants and what they have. And in that crucial, uncomfortable gap, an absolute miracle happens. The child learns to suit themselves. They learn to adapt. They realize that frustration is not a fatal condition, but a temporary state they can actually survive entirely on their own. This is the radical, liberating magic of being just good enough. Imagine the profound psychological relief of finally accepting this truth. You are officially absolved of the chronic, suffocating guilt that whispers you are never doing enough. You do not have to be a flawless, constantly regulated emotional robot. You are allowed to be tired. You are allowed to be impatient. You are allowed to say no simply because you are out of energy, and you do not have to follow it up with a 10-minute therapeutic debrief. It is time to officially resign from your position as the CEO of your child's development. The company is bankrupt, and the product doesn't need your management anyway. Delete the tracking apps. Close the developmental spreadsheets. Stop obsessing over percentiles, wake windows, and meticulously curated sensory bins. When you drop the metrics, your home stops being a corporate boardroom and becomes a sanctuary again. Your marriage can finally breathe. Your child does not need a project manager. They do not need an emotional bodyguard. They just need a wildly imperfect human being who loves them deeply, but who trusts them enough to let them fall. Your sheer exhaustion is the final proof that the optimization experiment has failed. You have given them absolutely everything. Now, you must give them the one thing they actually need to grow. Space. Space to be bored. Space to fail. Space to feel the natural, unfiltered friction of being alive. You don't need to be their manager, their curator, or their perfectly optimized guide. You just need to be good enough. But as you finally close the spreadsheets and let them stumble for the very first time, are you ready to discover who your child actually is when you stop telling them who to be?